and start to be respectful of your time and get you out of here and home with your family. But you all are about to enter a very exciting time. Some of you, as I look around, this is not your first rodeo. It's the second verse of that same song. So welcome to the repeat show. But for many of you, this will be the first time you go down this journey with your child. And I promise you, it will be exciting, it will be exhausting, and it will be scary. I can almost guarantee you there will be tears somewhere along the way. Maybe yours and maybe your child's. But just expect them and go with it. But I want you to know that we're here to go down that journey with you, and we're going to do everything we can to make it less exhaustive and to help you with all that anxiety. And so to start with that path and our partnership, please bow your heads in prayer and we'll pray together. Gracious God, you have blessed us with talented and gifted children, and you have entrusted us with their care. May we work together to help discern your will in their lives, and may we help to equip them for college and beyond, emotionally, physically, academically, and spiritually. May we see a goal for them, and may we help them realize that goal, and do all we can in our power to help them reach the many goals that they will have in their lives. Knowing first and foremost, our joint goal is that they know and love you as a child of God. In closing, we ask that you surround them with the peace that passes all understanding. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. I would like to invite Joe Pagan up to start our program for this evening. So this is Miss Joe Pagan.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm quickly going to just remind you of who is a part of our counseling staff, and then Mrs. Bell will pick up and talk about a portion of the program, followed by Mrs. Uzier and then myself. A variety of things to talk about with you. The entire college counseling staff, or not just the college counseling, but counseling staff is represented up here on the screen. Carrie Ramos is our Director of Counseling for all grades 7 through 12. And then I'm the Director of College Counseling, also an academic advisor. And then Mrs. Uzier is also the College and Academic Advisor for grades 11 and 12. Mrs. Bell is a college advisor as well as our Director of Strategic Initiatives. And then supporting us in the college office, Beverly McHenry helps as our college coordinator, but she's also an academic advisor for the 9th graders. So just so you know, we've got a variety of folks there ready to help in this journey and others. Now, turning it to Mrs. Bell.
Thank you, Mrs. Pagan, and maybe let me go with this for now. So we're going to start with an overview of the evening, and this just gives you a rundown of the topics we're going to cover. Trends in college admissions. One of the themes of this evening is things have changed a lot since the point that we all applied to college. And in fact, they change every single year in some small ways and sometimes in some bigger ways. So we are tasked with keeping abreast of any big changes on a year-to-year basis, but tonight's conversation is pointing out some of the things that have definitely changed since the time frame where our generation applied to college. So we'll talk about the application, we'll talk about getting in, we'll talk about factors in admissions. Cost, obviously, is often on the forefront of college placement, and something that parents in particular are going to be paying a lot of attention to. And we'll talk about other factors related to the college application in terms of character and reporting of any sorts of negative things that might be a part of the high school experience. We're going to talk about the role of the counseling staff and how we're here to help you all along the way. And Dr. Cobb did a wonderful job of describing the journey that this is, and I think the important thing to know is that we're alongside of you for that journey. And as a note, we will be emailing this to you, the PowerPoint, and also Mr. Toohill is recording for us. So if you feel the need to break this information down again in a more in-depth way, we are going to give you some avenues to do that. So, without further ado, we like to collect fun cartoons, and Zits is always good for some of these college conversations. So this is a great one related to mom saying to son, who wasn't really thinking along these lines, do you realize your college application is due in 2 years and you haven't even started on the essays? So here we are, kind of in that year away time frame, and your child may or may not be already thinking along these lines. So we're here to kind of foreshadow what this next year is going to entail. So thinking back to the point that we applied to college, think about where you attended college and how you got there. Like how did this process start for you when you were in high school? How many of you as a junior in high school probably weren't necessarily hearing specific information about the process? Or did you feel like, so many of you just were going through the motions of going to high school, doing the things that were in front of you, but not necessarily thinking and worrying about the process. That's kind of different these days. There is a lot of information out there readily accessible to parents and students, and there does tend to be an earlier thought of we need to be doing some proactive things to get ready for this time in my child's career. So thinking of the college that you attended, think about why you might have chosen that college. What were some of the overriding factors in choosing one place over another? How many of you applied to just one college? And anyone applied to just, wow, okay, usually there's more than that. So Mrs. Pagan applied to just one college. How many of you applied to 3 or fewer colleges? Okay, a majority there. How many of you applied to 8 or more colleges? So small number. How did you apply to college? Any of you remember typing a college application? I remember that. Lots of that part of the process is different. 98% of the college process is online, which certainly fits with what is going on in the students' world in other areas as well, and our lives as well. But it certainly has made it easier to apply to college in many ways, but then at the same time it also kind of made it more complicated. So it's very different in terms of the actual approach to the college process and the actual applying to college work and tasks that your child is going to be having happen to them in the next year. So your experience is going to be very different than theirs. One of the things that we know in our office is that in our time when we were applying to college and we were submitting a paper application, the postmark deadline and allowing time for things to physically arrive in a college office was a lot different than when you can be working on your application at 11:59 and it's due at midnight and still meet a college deadline. That's a little bit different, and that can cause a great deal of anxiety for the parent who's like, but the deadline is right now and it's coming up, and the student's like, oh, I got this. They operate in this world that is a little bit different. So lots of differences in the process. One of the big things, and kind of have already referenced this by quizzing you all about the number of colleges you've applied to, that you applied to, is the number of colleges that students overall often tend to apply to. And we're at the 7 or more applications is that yellow line. And at Holy Trinity, I would say our average last year, I believe, was about 7, so kind of in line with the national numbers as well. And it just depends on the student. There are some that submit fewer and some that submit more. Beyond 10 starts to get really to be too much for the student. They may think it feels easy because everything's online, but it then possibly doesn't turn out to be easy because there are lots of parts and pieces to manage that go along with all those applications. So 7 to 10-ish is a range that you're probably thinking about doing. The other thing that sometimes parents are not factoring in is that every college is going to charge an application fee. And these days the average is $50, but it can go all the way up to $75, $80, $90 per application. So even though it's online and it might feel really easy to apply to a lot of colleges, it can quickly add up in terms of application fees, and then also there are additional fees related to sending test scores and some of those other things, which is part of why we would work with students to develop a list that is really a targeted list, not just to throw the net out there to a bunch of schools that they're possibly not as knowledgeable about or interested in. So why are they applying to more schools? I've already mentioned the online aspect of things. There are also a couple of what are called common applications or the coalition application. And that did exist. It's existed for a long time. Originally it was on paper, now it's all online. And by applying using a common application or coalition application, you have the opportunity to complete one application that then goes out to multiple, that can be sent out to multiple colleges. In addition to that common application, many colleges will also have a supplemental portion that is specific to that particular college. So that portion would be an additional piece, even though you've got the main part of the application that goes in a common format to all colleges. That supplement is something that might have some additional essays or responses that are tailored to that very specific university. So that is part of the streamlining of the process. There is also an element of shopping that is different than when we might have applied to college, and obviously the ability to Google and to do virtual tours and chat with people through the internet is one way that students and families are going to start shopping for colleges, but visiting campuses still remains one of the best ways to really, number one, get students to visualize themselves as a college student, and perhaps visualize themselves being at a particular college. But there are many avenues for doing that. Some of your students last year in the 10th grade, we went to Stetson, and we do that as an initial look at how to do a college visit. It's not necessarily about a specific college, but having the chance to say, when I go to a college, I'm going to check in at the admission office, I'm going to go on a tour, I'm going to ask questions, I'm going to hear a presentation from an admission counselor, I'm going to know what to look for in terms of college visits. So that shopping element is important. We use Naviance at Holy Trinity, and your students have been on Naviance through our retreat days on occasion, in advising sessions, particularly as we get into this phase of things, junior year and then senior year. You and your students will both be using Naviance quite a bit. And there are some great things on Naviance that allow that shopping element. You can do searches, you can put in different criteria related to size, location, majors, area of the country, all of that, and come up with different sorts of lists that might help a student come up with ideas of schools that they might be interested in. Our college festival is another opportunity for that shopping, and obviously college rep visits as they come to campus. And it's our goal to help widen the net and come up with a list of schools, not just one school to focus on. The other part of the shopping is the price tag, because obviously as a parent you're thinking about the high cost of college education, that does come into play. And do think of it kind of like you think of going in to buy a car is that you look at the sticker price and kind of know in the back of your mind that that is probably not what you're going to pay at the end of the day after you've gone through the process of negotiating what the actual price is. It was also, I heard an analogy to going to TJ Maxx when you see the $12.99 shirt, that you look at the suggested retail price of $85, and college and the price tag of college may seem like that same sort of thing. So looking at colleges with that in mind, and as part of that shopping, you want to be aware of that. And I think it's mentioned later, but there is something on every single college website as you're doing this sort of research that's called the net price calculator, and that will allow you to put in some information and have the college tell you more than just the sticker price, what an actual price might be for your family based on anything related to your financial need as well as your students' academic qualifications that might result in some sort of merit scholarship. 97% of colleges are using social media in their recruitment efforts. That is something that probably your student is more aware of, and as they are not only getting physical mail sent to the house, once they are kind of on the radar and on a mailing list, they would also potentially be recruited using some of the social media that they're so savvy with. For the first time last year, one of the colleges that my son applied to, he actually got a text with his admission notification prior to any sort of email, physical mail, anything like that. And it was really cute, but it was, a different way of communicating and recruiting. Different deadlines. That's another piece of why kids are applying to more colleges. There are priority deadlines, there are early decision, which is a binding commitment, there's early action, there's rolling decision, there's regular decision. It's not necessarily as straightforward as it might have felt when we were presented with our options for how and when to apply. And there's some strategy, perhaps, to when a student might submit an application, and that's something that the college's advisors will work with you on. So applying to more colleges, yes, it is definitely the case for students of this generation, and these are some of the reasons why. So getting in, I'm not going to read through all of these, but we hear a lot about how hard it is to get into college, and yes, there are a very, very top group in terms of selectivity that are going to have very low acceptance rates, but I'll show you some statistics in a moment that show you that a vast majority of colleges do not have those very, very, very selective percentiles of students from their applicant pool that they admit. So this gives you some of that data to show you different things about the getting in part. There's a lot of conversation about this aspect of things. Is the brand name college education essential? And a second part of that is the brand name college education that you have to pay full price for essential, and thinking about the big picture of that. There are many, many examples of looking at Fortune 500 CEOs and where they went to college, and is that brand name super, super selected school the only path to getting into that upper echelon of our corporate culture or any of that. So that's something that each individual student and parent kind of need to consider as you're going into this process, that there are many, many schools out there that offer things different in different ways. So understanding and researching that is important. So this is kind of what I was referring to earlier. If there are 3,600 colleges, two and 4-year colleges, there are 1,600 2-year colleges that will admit anyone who holds a high school diploma. So to say that college is not accessible in big ways is probably not the case. there are only 135 of those colleges that accept fewer than 50% of their applicants, and only 24 that admit fewer than 25% of their applicants. So this breaks it down for you to kind of show where that it's so hard to get into college myth is exactly that, a myth. So one of the things that we're going to do a little different this year, and I would urge everyone right now to mark your calendars for this date, and this is bringing in straight from the horse's mouth experts to talk about some of these things related to trends and admissions, selectivity and fit, all of that. We're going to have representatives from Georgia Tech admissions, the Colleges That Change Lives Consortium, which are a group of smaller colleges that are known for great results, but maybe not as selective in terms of the admission part of things, and University of Florida. So we're trying to kind of cover lots of bases with this panel, but we would invite you, and we would also invite you to invite friends. This is something that we're opening up to the community, and we have a big space, and we can accommodate a lot of people, and I don't want to have our speakers not have the chance to talk to a wide audience. So we invite both students and parents to attend this event with the people from these universities that will kind of reinforce and talk in a different way from their perspective about some of the same things we're talking about tonight. So the next part of our presentation is an activity that we've done for a very long time, but still remains very relevant. We do this with the students as well, and Mrs. Uzira is going to take over and talk about the GPA game.
All right, I need 11 people to help me out. Not all at once. 11, come on down. I just need 11 people. I won't ask too much of you, I promise. You're just going to be doing this and this. I'll give you instructions. See a couple more. It's good. It's good. There's no expectation of knowledge. It's okay. I need 3 more, please, please, please. Pretty please. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So the way that this particular game works, and just to let y'all know, they've been given a card that has a GPA on it. Okay, so what I need y'all to do really quickly is line up in order of your GPA. This will probably be the hardest part of the night.
From highest to lowest?
Highest over here to lowest over here. And while they're doing that, I'm going to read a couple of scenarios. Okay, and if it's on your card, you move to the left or to the right based on whether what I'm stating is on your card. Okay, so the first one is if you have taken an exceptionally strong academic program, step to the right 2 people. So if that's on your card, you'll step to the right 2 people. Okay, and the point being with this one is that a strong academic program is viewed as being a pretty important component of admissions, and that's ultimately what this game is trying to illustrate, is what are admissions counselors looking for when they're reviewing applications. So the rigor is definitely a piece of it, which is why that student moved over too. If your father and grandfather both attended the college, move to the right one. All right, what is this person called? If your parents went there, grandparents went there. All right, legacy. All right, and so this is still a component in admissions, but it is not nearly as important as it used to be. So we hear a lot like, well, I went there and my parents went there and my great aunt went there and I'm pretty sure that like my great somebody's brother went there too, which is great. And it gives you a really good perspective on that school, but it's not always as strong of an indicator as it has been in the past with regards to that legacy status. All right, if you play the oboe or the viola, step to the right 1. Okay, so with this one, it's just being involved in music programs, but also these instruments are not super common. I didn't say trumpet, which is a phenomenal instrument, but a lot of times a band or an orchestra or anything like that, they're going to be looking for, we already have X amount of this or X amount of that. And if you're playing a unique instrument or something like that, it can be helpful. Okay, if you play the flute well enough to be first chair in the All-State Orchestra, move to the right 2. All right, so a flute, fairly common. However, being the first chair in All-State Orchestra indicates success in playing the flute, but also indicates that you've put in a lot of hard work and a lot of time and a lot of commitment to this particular activity, which is what schools like to see. If you clearly stated that this college was your first choice by applying early decision, move to the right 2. Anybody have that one on there? You did early decision. So you move to the right 2.
How many do I move
2.
I'm not very bright.
No. All right, and again, as Mrs. Bell was talking about, that early decision, we're talking about expressed interest with the school. And if you're telling the school, you're my number 1, that can give you a bit of advantage in admission. Okay, your intended major is psychology. Move to the left 1. Okay. Here's the thing. There are some majors in which there are a lot of people wanting to major in psychology, right? And so the idea being is that if it's a major that everybody and their brother seems to be applying for, it doesn't necessarily set you apart. And there are some programs at some schools that will actually have restricted admissions policies, and they'll only let in X number of majors in this particular area. So this is something that your student will definitely want to research with regards to declaring a major. Most of the time, we usually advise, we want you to major in what you're wanting to major in, but there is some consideration with regards to that. If your intended major is business, which is not a major at this college, move to the left 4. All right, who knows what the problem is with that particular one? You want to do something that they don't offer at that school, they're kind of wondering, did you look at what we offer? Okay, so A, you're not going to get what you want, and B, you're not exactly showing the school that you've done your research and are interested. All right, your intended major is Greek. Move to the right 2. Or 1, all you can go. All right, and the idea being here is there are not many people that are very interested in Greek as a major, so it sets you aside possibly in that admissions process. All right, if you do not know any of your teachers well and had trouble finding someone to write a letter of recommendation for you, move to the left 2. Is anybody with letter recommendation on there? Move to the left 2. Okay, this is important. I'm always telling my child this, right? What your teachers think counts. You're going to need a letter of recommendation. And if you haven't really had the chance, if your student hasn't had the chance or the inclination to develop relationships with teachers, it can be very difficult. Most of the time, a teacher will write a letter of recommendation for a student, but it might be like, John is tall, and maybe not quite like that. But the better the relationship that these students develop with their teachers, the more likely they are to be able to get a good letter, whereas if they haven't developed relationships, it's going to be that much more difficult to even get someone to write the letter, but also to get the letter that we really want to see, which is John is amazing and tall, but ridiculously great in the classroom, etc., etc. Okay, if your school offered 10 AP courses and you did not take any, let's move to the left 2. All right, what this is essentially indicating is rigor, right? Sometimes students, you know what, an AP class is not in their wheelhouse in terms of what is best for them. However, a lot of students, what they're trying to do is play a game. And so, I can get all A's in my honors class and not try my hardest in, excelling in an AP class, then that could be seen by those admissions counselors. All right, if you did not write the optional essay for your college application, move to the left one. Oh. When they say optional, they don't really mean optional. Let's go ahead and encourage our students that, because they'll say, I don't really have to do this. Yep, if optional means go ahead and do it. All right, if the topic of your essay was what I learned from playing sports, move to the left one. It is not that sports are bad. It is not that your student hasn't developed and become an amazing person through participating in sports, or they've changed their life due to a mission trip or something of that nature. Phenomenal, and a huge important role in their life, but what we find is that every third person is writing the same essay. And that's not desirable when you're sifting through a lot of different essays. You want something that stands out, not something that every third person is going to be writing about. All right, if you wrote the essay of the year, the one that was passed around to all of the admissions officers because it was so remarkable, step to the right 3. If you're that guy, this is good. And by the way, we'll talk a little bit more about later, we will help your student in writing their essay. So if they come to us and they're like, I wrote about my basketball, we'll be like, that's amazing. How about this? Okay? And we want you guys to have a student with a great essay that they feel comfortable with that sets them apart. Right? That's part of what we do and what we get excited about. And we've got some phenomenal ones that have come across our desks, and we pass them around, which is a good sign. So you moved quite a bit. That's good. If you plagiarized when writing your junior thesis and got caught, go ahead and sit down. You're out of this one. I hope I don't need to explain that one. All right, we want to make sure that your kids and are not doing anything of that nature because it can be seen as extremely negative with regards to college admission. Same thing if that applies to your college essay, if you plagiarize that. If you have worked one steady job since summer before your junior year and your junior year GPA actually went up, move to the right 4. All right, colleges love to see students that know how to balance their lives, right? And some people think, it's only extracurricular. It's, I've got to belong to every single club. I've got to belong to every single sport. I've got to do. Those are all well and good. Those are great, but having a job also counts. Okay, if you're committing 25 hours a week to a job, that's pretty much the same level of commitment to 25 hours a week, playing soccer or something of that nature. So a lot of people are, again, depending on what your students' interests are, that can balance out. And if your GPA went up, you're showing commitment as well as being able to manage time and things of that nature. Okay, if your mother is a best-selling author, step to the right 1. Potential. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that can play in, and we'll talk a little bit about this at the end. But you kind of see where we're going with that. If neither of your parents nor any of your siblings have attended college, step to the right 2. All right, first generation. This is a big thing. Colleges are really encouraging first generation students to be on campus. And so it is a factor in admissions. If your senior year course load is noticeably less challenging than your junior year class load, step to the right, to the left, 2. What do you think that indicates to a school when your senior year you just decided to be like, I'm going to cruise? They want to see consistency, and they actually would like to see it the other way around. If you start 9th grade, no honors classes, but you end 12th grade with a spattering of honors and maybe an AP, they'd rather see that type of progression than the opposite. If a search on Facebook, Instagram, Snap, etc. shows photos of you drinking alcohol at a friend's party, let's move 3 to the left. All right, by the way, colleges, if they can, they will look at your social media, your applicant's social media, right? I mean, that's something that they have been known to use. And we've heard people losing scholarships, sports scholarships, etc. Not necessarily here, but it's not uncommon. So that's something for your student to consider. If you have participated in 0 extracurricular activities, move to the left 3. Again, schools are wanting to see where students are going to fit. All right, if you might have a great GPA, but if you're not doing anything else, it's not necessarily indicating to that school that you've got interests that are going to be represented across the board at their school. Okay, so yes, grades are important, but those extracurriculars definitely play a role as well. If you have participated in a significant community service project or trip, move to the right one. All right, and that's also goes to showing commitment, and especially if your students are putting together almost like I'd even say a portfolio with their community service, that they've been committed to one thing or one organization throughout their entire time, then that indicates, again, commitment and that type of thing, which is great. If you were an Eagle Scout, move to the right 2. And that's just the highest level that you can achieve in Boy Scouts. So again, commitment, service, things of that nature. If you came to the college visit at your school and introduced yourself to the representative, move to the right 1. All right, this one's awesome. We have college representatives on our campus all the time. And a lot of times the kids, don't necessarily see it as being important, but a lot of times those college representatives are the ones reviewing your application. So you walk up, you say, hey, my name is Melissa Uzier. It's so nice to meet you. I'm very, very interested in blank university. It's one of my top choices, and be genuine, right? That person, when they're going through the applications, they're going to remember, and they say that. They say that to us over and over and over again, so important. If you got a D in an academic course at the end of your junior year, move to the left 3. We tell juniors, A's and B's are our goal, right? Definitely don't want to see a D at the end. However, if you came to the college visit and introduced yourself to the representative and explained the reason you received the D in an academic course, move to the right 1. It's not the end-all be-all. You haven't ruined everything for all eternity. There are opportunities to be able to explain yourself, because it might be that it had nothing to do with your ability, or had nothing to do with your actual commitment, but it might have been that a family member passed away, or something else to explain it. And if you can make that, you can reach out to that representative, it can soften the blow a bit. If you are a varsity tennis player and took second place at regional competition, move to the right 3. So that is very similar to what we were talking about, musicians and things of that nature, those extra, extracurriculars, but on top of that, being able to show commitment and, considerable amount of time usually that it requires to get to that level. If you are a varsity basketball player, move to the right 2. Okay. And again, that idea of, being committed to something and playing at a high level. If you are a varsity cross-country runner and have set a state record, move 3 to the right. We have a cross-country state winner. Might have been the person that sat down somewhere. Okay, and that's along the same lines. All right, a couple more. If you came to the college visit and introduced yourself to the representative and followed up with an email asking a question that could not be answered by a thorough search of the college website, move to the right 1. Oh, seriously. Okay, so not only are you reaching out and showing effort, and you're introducing yourself, you're sending an email, right, which is amazing. You're putting that extra on there, and you asked a question that you can't find on the front page. Pretty straightforward on why that one works. Okay, if you are a legal resident of Idaho, move to the right 3. I know, this one's weird, but it's true. Okay? Schools are really looking, they have amazing amounts of computer programs. They spend money trying to figure out how they're going to fill their incoming classes. How many people can we let in that we think will say yes? How many can we let in that we're not sure will say yes? But they also want diversity across the board, whether it's gender, whatever it is, but that includes geography. There are not very many people from Idaho. So if we're looking for across the board, all 50 states are represented at our university. Boom, Idaho got you 3 spaces over. Okay, and unfortunately that's just a circumstance of where you live and where you're born, but it just kind of gives you the idea of some of those outliers that can be important. If you never gave your advisor the autobiographical information to use in writing the advisor recommendation, move to the left one. Okay. All right, here's the thing. This is so important. We asked parents and students to fill out this questionnaire as they're coming into their senior year. I can tell you, I use those, Mrs. Bell uses those, Mrs. Pagan uses those in writing our letters of recommendation. Because we oftentimes know your student, but you might be able to tell us something amazing, right? I could be like, Joanna is a really hard worker. But if she filled out that questionnaire, and you filled out that questionnaire, and you can give me a really great anecdote that I could throw into that essay or that letter of recommendation that really shows that, top notch. It adds so much more depth and uniqueness to these these letters of recommendation. We work really hard on these to make them very, very unique to your student, but the more specific things that we can add in, it's amazing. So super, super helpful. If your junior year grades are better than your sophomore year grades, which are better than your freshman year grades, move to the right one. So already mentioned that. If you participated in an enriching summer program between your junior and senior year, move to the right one. Those are great opportunities for your students. If it's a research program or a leadership program or anything like that, if you hear of those, please let us know if you have any questions. Some of them are chance to make money. Some of them are amazing and wonderful and can really be beneficial when you're talking about college admission. If your SAT or ACT score is in the top 25% for this college, as listed in the guidebook, move to the right one. So we will be talking about testing in a few minutes, but it is important. More and more schools are going to test optional, which is why that person didn't move more than one, but still important. And our final, thank goodness, right? If your last name is Gates, Gates, the name of the college library is Gates, and it's not a coincidence, move to the front of the line and stay there. All right, so we started with our 4.0 going down. I think it was like a 3.1, somewhere in 2 point something. If you guys could we'll start over here where we had our 4.0 originally and just explain or just read out your GPA, which is at the top of the card.
Apparently it doesn't matter. So it's 3.2.
3.4.
3.6.
4.0.
3.0. 3.9. 3.5. 3.1.
3.7.
Okay, so not a perfect kind of thing, but can you see that it's not just the GPA that we get also focused on? Thank you guys so much. I'll take your cards. And we do that with the students too, and they're like, whoa, I had no idea, because we get so fixated on certain things. But this chart, and again, if the writing is a little small, we are going to be emailing it to you, but this is factors in admissions decisions. So it talks about considerable influence, moderate influence, limited influence, or no influence. Grades is at the top. We don't want you to think that grades are not important, because they are. It's just that they're not the end-all be-all. Next is going to be your college prep, and we're also looking here when you're talking about your strength of curriculum. So those top three kind of work together, all right? And we also help you, and you've been working with other academic advisors, Mrs. Ramos, up until this point. We're here also to kind of help you with that grades thing, as well as the strength of curriculum and all. Test scores, It's true, they're important. SAT, ACT. Then you've got your essay or writing sample. And then demonstrated interest, and this is things like you visited the school, you've emailed the representative, you've gone to the college visits. Those are all things you can apply early action or early decision. This also falls into that demonstrated interest category. Counselor recommendation, and then teacher letters of recommendation. And you can kind of see the spread there, but it gives you an idea of what really they're looking at for the most part. We're going to kind of break it down.
Melissa,
Yes.
the strength of curriculum, is that per the specific classes the student takes, or is that by institution as well? And if so, I assume Holy Trinity is rated very high as far as the curriculum.
Yes. So yes to yes, all of those questions. Essentially, yes, the strength of curriculum and your GPA are going to probably be at the top in terms of importance. Okay, that GPA game was just the illustration that it's not everything. Okay, but it is going to be one of the most important. One thing, and I'm going to get back to your question for sure. One of the things that we want y'all to know pretty quickly, and we'll be saying this a lot, is that the GPA that you all see on your students' report cards at the semester and on their transcripts is not necessarily the GPA that the colleges are going to be using. They recalculate your GPA, and each college does it slightly different. Even Bright Futures recalculates your GPA. So while that GPA is an important number that you're seeing, it's not exactly what schools are going to be looking at, because what they also do is look at that strength of schedule. Okay, so AP classes, honors classes are weighted. Okay, so that weighted GPA and all, but sometimes schools will only look at core classes. English, math, science, okay, social science, nothing else. And so they'll only calculate your GPA based on those things. Some will say, okay, well, we will take also your core classes and academic electives, but not count any non-academic electives. They'll weight, again, AP versus honors versus non-honors. All of those things are playing into the calculation that they do. And with regards to being Holy Trinity, when we send your students transcripts, we also send a school report. Okay, and this essentially basically tells them about Holy Trinity. We've been around for a while now. Many of the schools, especially in the state of Florida, and actually quite a few outside of Florida, they know who we are now. Right? So they understand that a degree from Holy Trinity means something different. And they actually, again, do a lot of research on this. We were actually at a panel last week at a conference, and the director of freshman admission for the University of Florida was saying, we have a high school here and then a high school down the street, and we know that a 4.0 here is totally different than a 4.0 there. They understand that, and that's usually spelled out a little bit more in the school
School report.
Thank you, profile, blank. That's spelled out, so there is the acknowledgement that a student graduating from here with these classes is going to be slightly different than maybe another school. So they're trying to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges instead of the other. But that is important. So that course curriculum, what you're taking, does matter. The fact that you're at Holy Trinity does matter. Another question we get a lot is about class rank. We do not rank. We don't have number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. And that's a question that a lot of schools may ask. Fewer and fewer schools are actually asking that. But it seems to be a common question on scholarship applications and the like. We don't rank. We do have a kind of percentage that we can answer those questions with, but fewer and fewer high schools are actually ranking students anymore, right? Because of a lot of different factors. So grades are important. Strength of curriculum is important. They want to see that rigor reflected. Another thing that's going to be highly ranking is your SAT and your ACT. Before I move on, I do want to kind of just briefly mention maybe an elephant in the room, I don't know, but it kind of relates to Mr. Gates here that donated all the money to the library, and a student moved up to the front with 3.2. You guys have heard of the Varsity Blues? Maybe, maybe not. The admission scandal, okay, etc. A lot of that has really, the college admissions people, as awful as it has been, has helped to really bring about even more transparency in the process. So that kind of thing is going to be way, 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 way harder to do. And a lot of it did center around ACT and SAT, which is kind of why I'm taking the break right now and paying people, to take the SAT and the ACT. Obviously, nobody in here would even consider that. But the idea being is that they were paying for that because these can weigh in that consideration. But one thing we do want to make sure that you know, that even though you might be hearing that, especially associated with that scandal, is that more and more schools are going test optional. They're starting to realize more and more that one day, one Saturday morning does not define a student, which is why your grades and your strength of curriculum are usually higher. And I'm not talking about like Podunk U and Nowhereville, USA. I'm talking about the University of Chicago, Wake Forest, schools like that. So before we even go into this, a lot of people get very freaked out, including your students. But it's going to be okay. So our recommended plan for the SAT and the ACT is that your student will probably take it 3 to 5 times. Some take it less. Some people take it the first time, nail it out of the park, and they're like, I'm good. I never want to do that again, ever. Right? Some students will struggle and until they get it right. And sometimes it's practice gets a little better with these types of testing. But again, we do have students who say, you know what? Okay, test optional is my route. But generally the 3 to 5 is your kind of range. One thing that's really important is that HT does provide the PSAT. There's no registration required on your part or anything like that. However, with the SAT and the ACT, your student will have to register for those tests. So your student will need to go onto the College Board website to register for the SAT, and your student will need to go onto the ACT website and register for the ACT when they are ready. I emphasize your student because this is part of their job, is to register. And I know it's very tempting, well, yeah, they're so busy, I'll just do it for them, but what ends up happening quite often is that you create a login, I'm gonna sign them up. They already have a login. And it's very challenging to be able to blend those two. And they come into our office and they're like, I need to check my SAT scores. And we're like, okay, log in, we'll help you. Oh, I don't know, my mom did it. Right, so the student. But they do have to do that themselves. We are here to help because it can be a little bit of a lengthy process, especially the first time. In terms of the timetable, we suggest that your students take the SAT and the ACT at some point in the spring of their junior year. It might be that they don't feel ready, and that's okay, they can wait. This is not an end-all be-all, this is a suggestion. So taking that SAT and ACT in the spring. It might be a good idea to start taking a look at those test dates. All right, and if you know that your student is ready and wanting to get started, you can go ahead and register them, and then you might have a better chance of getting the preferred actual testing sites. So your student, if you live in Melbourne Beach, isn't having to drive to Titusville. So spring, junior year, then we suggest, that's kind of the baseline. This should not be the time to do hardcore intensive testing. One thing that I think all of us say when we meet with juniors for the first time is your job is your junior year grades. Okay, so we don't want to be detracting from their junior year grades preparing for this, but we consider this first one as kind of a baseline. And we'll talk about preparing in a little bit. We also suggest they take it the summer between the junior and senior year, taking the SAT and the ACT again. This is where we can highly recommend any kind of more intense type of preparation, whether it's a one-day course or a week-long course or a tutor, that's completely up to y'all. And by the way, we're here to help you with any of that. One thing that is kind of nice with Bright Futures is that you can test all the way through June of your senior year. Nobody wants to do that, but if you're getting really close, you can still be testing through. And it's actually quite common for seniors to be testing in the fall, but that whole Bright Futures thing. So that's our suggested timetable. With regards to the PSAT that your students took in October, we should be getting those results in the next month or so. It might be, I did hear one person saying that they thought they might be around. You can always check on that College Board website. December 12th, there we go. Okay, with regards to preparing, that PSAT that's available on December 12th is going to be helpful. You can receive your PSAT scores. Khan Academy is amazing. Khan Academy is free. There's an app. it's on the computer. And what your student can do is they can, basically take little practice units. They can take practice tests, and you can also link up your PSAT results with Khan Academy. So if your student struggled with a particular type of math, they're going to be given a lot more math to work on than things they're good at, which can be frustrating, but also very, very helpful. So Khan Academy helps to prepare for the SAT. Also, we gave y'all, and if you don't have it, we still have some copies in the office. Most of your students took the practice ACT in their sophomore year at their sophomore retreat. And again, we gave those out a lot in the summer conferences, but if you weren't able to make it in or it somehow walked away, we can get you that information. But ACT, you can also prepare for that using that particular practice exam. But also, ACT has their own prep course called ACT University. And you can go onto the ACT website, and it does very similar to Khan Academy. So those are easy online types of prep. We can also suggest using time like Christmas break, winter break, spring break to do the prep. Remember, during their junior year, their job still is their junior year grades. But anything that they can do to prepare coming up for those spring tests is going to be extremely helpful. But the more intensive type of thing, usually we suggest in the summer. Just a couple other pieces. We do offer some test prep, oftentimes during a winter break, or it'd be like a day-long thing. We offer, just to kind of keep your eyes out for an email that gives that information. Your students' courses prepare them for the SAT and the ACT. Every day they're sitting in their math class, they're preparing for the SAT and the ACT. Every day they're in English class, they're preparing for the SAT and ACT. Not in its traditional sense where they're talking about, this math problem, but they're learning, so the classes that they're taking right now, it's going to be helpful for them in preparing. And again, mention Khan Academy and ACT. A lot of students ask, do I need to do the writing? There are fewer and fewer colleges asking for the writing portion on the SAT and the ACT. It just makes the test that much longer. So I would suggest if there are schools that your student is just really, really interested in, check their website and see if they ask for it. If they don't, you're good to go. You don't necessarily have to sign up for that part. Once they kind of get that baseline, we do suggest they take the SAT and the ACT. However, as they start moving forward, if they're finding that the ACT is more in their wheelhouse, we can just go ahead and move to the ACT in terms of most of their prep and instead of trying to divide their prep between the two tests. That's something that kind of we start talking to y'all about when we meet, over the course of the next couple of months. But both of them are accepted by all schools, or almost all schools, and most of them don't care whichever one. They'll just take the best ACT or the best SAT. And as I mentioned, you've got the test optional that is starting to come around. I mentioned the University of Chicago, Wake Forest, NYU test optional. So that's an increasing trend. But still fairly important. If you do want to test that test optional list, there's a website, fairtest.org, that gives you the idea of what schools are test optional. All right, so we'll talk about some more things with Ms.
Okay, so still talking kind of about items that were mentioned and reviewed with the GPA gang, things that are important and going to be considered in the application review. Activities, as the resume more or less is what we're going to talk about for just a moment here. Another area too that is probably quite different from maybe when you applied to school. I know I didn't have a college resume. I'm curious if any of you put together a resume enlisting your activities while you were in high school. Anybody happen to do that? See one hand, two? A few people did, right? Okay, so this is definitely a more current trend. As far as our emphasis and the guidance that we provide and so forth, we really are trying to get them to pay attention to the quality of their involvements rather than just adding one activity after another. It's not the number of the activities, it's really the how in-depth and how involved they really are. From conversations already, just looking at the examples in the GPA game, the long-term standing commitments, the ability to maintain those, and at the same time keep their act together for school probably means that you don't want them overextending themselves. If they're spending hours and hours on the athletic field and plus they have to come home and study and so forth, it doesn't make sense to spread themselves too thin. The idea of the top three, even giving them an opportunity maybe to create a focus almost. It's really trying to get them to think about areas that they're interested in and can potentially look for further development of those interests and maybe even looking for leadership opportunities, things like that. As far as types of things that go on the resume, certainly clubs and organizations at school, outside things, community service that they all have to do for graduation, that certainly can be a part of it as well. Those leadership experiences, like I mentioned, that would come from that deeper commitment and that longer term involvement with different organizations, part-time jobs that were mentioned already, and summer experiences. The summer experiences, sometimes they are academic in nature, of course, and as far as how to put it together and making it look really nice and so forth, that's where we come in and try and give them some guidance. They actually started resumes last year as sophomores. I'm curious if any of you've seen your son or daughter's resume or their draft. It's time to encourage them to find it, dust it off a little bit, and we're going to actually keep them after chapel tomorrow and remind them, yes, they did start one last year, and to actually go ahead and work on some updates. As far as going further with that, because many of them are going to have questions and they need guidance. It's a draft, by all means. We want a chance to look at them. So when we get back after Christmas, we're going to hold some resume workshops. We're actually going to do it where we're dividing them up a little bit, having them sign up, so it's a smaller group of students at a time. We have a chance to look at them closely, and then it's also going to be sort of a gateway into a little bit longer conversation with just their advisor, not you yet, but with their advisor, just to catch up on how things went first semester. Are they thinking about the testing that they need to be signing up on for, and then also looking at the resumes. But all of that is coming up, and you might just go home and say, hey, do you remember that resume you started? See if they can pull it up for you. Oh. Okay, I went too far. Okay, another item that is certainly going to be a part of the application review for many schools, not for all, would be an essay in the written portion. This ties in with their activities because very often it is from those activities that they're drawing inspiration and things that they want to share with the schools. There are all kinds of college essays. There are, we have made reference tonight to what's referred to as the common application, a generic version of an application form, whether it's that method or have you ever heard of coalition application? That was actually quite popular up until this year, even with the University of Florida. Now they're actually using the Common App as well. It's another generic template or version of an application. Regardless, whatever application essay they're facing and dealing with, the various prompts are more or less personal statements to some degree. They're always going to be asking to the students to describe themselves and describe things that they've learned, describe things that sort of indicate something about their personality and interests, and trying to encourage them to think about smaller amounts of time rather than trying to describe their entire life in 650 words. Just like with the resume, we definitely give them instruction and guidance on not just the topic and what they might actually want to write on, but even trying to make sure that rather than describing things and talking to you and describing the audience and what you might learn from something, redirecting them to bring it back on themselves and what it is that they learned. As far as how we work with them, basically, they will be hearing about the different college options in terms of essays. We'll start with the Common App essay prompts just as a way to get going because so many of the kids will use that application portal. But then we'll obviously, as we review things with them and then they make their choices about specific schools they're applying to, then whatever they've picked as their main topic that they work on, then sometimes it requires a little bit of tweaking. We're very fortunate to have the help of the English department through the AP Lang classes. Some of the juniors may very well have started an essay, actually. For the other junior English classes, if they haven't already talked about it, they will come this spring. Through our retreat sessions, they will get instruction from the college advisors first, and then follow up with the teachers. They actually make an assignment in the English class. The teachers have them turn it in, they give them initial feedback, and then that's eventually routed to the advisor. So it's a great way for them to get a good start before they leave for the summer, and then start potentially thinking about the actual application portion. Going back again to another characteristic from the GPA game, how are they going to demonstrate interest, which is something that colleges do track. As far as how many schools are kind of using this, at least in some way, shape, or form, the report that Mrs. Uzier had up a little bit before, the chart that showed those basic characteristics, it comes from a survey that's done. It's the State of College Admissions survey that's done by the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. And it's an annual survey, and basically all of the data that was in that chart, as well as this percentage and so forth, came from that report. And 68% of colleges assign some level of importance to the idea that students are indicating that they're interested in the school. Methods and ways that they're more or less evaluating that interest. Campus visits would certainly count. So when students are going and seeing those schools, making sure that it's an official visit is a good idea, meaning that they've registered through the website. The school knows that they're going to be there. Again, that's a great way for them to know they've taken the time to come out and learn. Attending even sessions that we have here at school, the representatives, when they come, will have the students fill out postcards because they're creating, their contact list and so forth. It's a way to know that that student was actually there. And then even beyond that, things that they can do would be even communicating when they're actually applying and so forth. Questions that they might have. Now going back again to something that Mrs. Uzier said, that you don't want them to be asking questions about things that they could easily Google or easily look up on their own, but if it's a legitimate question, something that's not explained quite well on the website, that certainly would be a reason to follow up with a representative. There are different kinds of essays, as I said before, and very often colleges that care about demonstrated interest, they will have a question that basically is, why do you want to come to our school? And students that have taken the time to learn, and through their visits and just through research, even virtually, they're the ones that are going to be able to answer those questions in a more authentic way, so that they don't sound like they've just copied and pasted a portion of the little brochure booklet that they got on the visit. That they've taken the time to really consider why this school might be a good fit for them, academically, in terms of what they want to study, or even the student life. But on the student life, again, it would need to be something specific. Those areas, just like with all the other prompts, we certainly are going to talk with them and try and give them guidance, but it's one of the ways that they could certainly demonstrate true interest in the school. In terms of just some other descriptive things, way colleges are evaluating the students again and what they're placing interest or their value on, attributing greater importance to strength of curriculum and grade in college prep courses. For the more selective schools, that certainly is a top priority. Emphasis beyond that could include other factors such as essay that I mentioned just a moment ago, class rank to some degree. We saw that the SOCA, the State of College Admissions Survey, was saying 9% or so of colleges are looking for that kind of information. Teacher and counselor recommendations, extracurricular activities, a resume, work, and portfolios. Smaller colleges tend to be placing more emphasis on these types of more subjective things, the things like the essay writing and so forth, interviews even, and rather than the larger schools, they tend to potentially put a little more emphasis on the test piece. Sheer volume of applications probably plays a great deal into that, and the amount of time that goes into reviewing applications. and having to read and go through all the various information. So we're going to shift a little bit to the college costs. In terms of changes, I think this is probably a major one, how expensive it is to attend certain schools these days, especially when you start looking just at that sticker price. It'll take your breath away. You're like, that's a year? Or what's worse is when you realize, oh, that's just one semester, and then you double it. So in terms of trying to help you in thinking about this, it's nice to know that kids really do care about this part of it. We hear them talking about it, and they are interested in looking for ways to make it a more affordable opportunity for them. In terms of things that we want to make sure you're aware of, and what we try to do is provide you information to examine and investigate all of these. One that's not listed, we have a Money Matters meeting in the early fall every year. Jay Lally, the Director of Financial Aid from FIT, comes, and it's in September, beginning of October, every year. Anybody here tonight that came to that meeting this year? But he's not here representing FIT. He really is just helping families understand how colleges are evaluating and figuring out what goes into the award package, the financial package for any individual, any student when they apply to their school. So if you didn't make it this year, just remember that it will be another opportunity for you as your kids are facing senior year applications. It's quite timely too, so you'll get more information about that, of course. Scholarship information, we try to make that as available to you as possible. Just from the communications that we have, are you familiar with our newsletter, the counseling newsletter? Every Friday, there's in the school email, there's always a link to our counseling newsletter, and the newsletter has information, including things like tonight, different upcoming events. There's information about summer programs. As we get more information about upcoming things, we post it there. And then very bottom of it is all about scholarships that we're familiar with. Some of them are nationwide searches, some of them are school specific, and some of them are just random, I don't know, there are all kinds of things. Some of them might be alumni scholarship opportunities. Do you remember the milk competition, the milk mustache? That's one for Coke and so forth. So check it out if you haven't before. As far as other scholarships, we're going to talk a moment about Bright Futures. And athletic scholarships, we certainly will talk about that if your son or daughter is thinking about playing their sport in school. Rising costs, again, we touched on that a moment ago. Yes, it is getting, and has been for a while, quite expensive. There are some initiatives that different schools have put into place. Rice University, for example, last year rolled out, actually they rolled it out this fall, an opportunity for low to middle income families. It's the middle part that might surprise you. For families that have incomes of $65,000 or less, essentially they can go, assuming they're admitted, okay, they're basically going tuition, room and board, fees covered. Families with incomes between $65,000 and $130,000, basically full tuition is covered. Anybody up to $200,000, it's half tuition. So it's a very selective school. But they made an agreement. They saw it as a very important opportunity for them to help middle-income families along with the lower income too. So just knowing that that's something you can look for. It depends on the school, but there are such opportunities, and they, I believe, are recognizing more and more how difficult it is for families to send their kids to certain schools. The net price calculator, Mrs. Bell mentioned that before. The other thing that's up there is the college scorecard. If you want to see little snapshots about schools, there is information about costs and so forth. All you have to do is type in the name of the college and it will bring up the scorecard and some basic information of the school. They do give details on the school websites. Wherever, if you go into admissions, that's one way to start, or if you just use their search boxes on their websites and you look for financial aid and financial information, cost of attendance, they'll give you the breakdown of all the various factors. Application costs, we touched on that also. The idea that, yes, per application, your students are paying $50 or so per app, potentially more. And then with that, you'll also have other expenses, including not just signing up for the tests, SAT and ACT, but then sending their scores to the colleges, there's another fee. So depending on the list of schools, so forth, even before they're talking about the final cost of attendance, you're dealing with significant money. Bright Futures. Okay, so Bright Futures, I'm hoping everybody is aware of the Florida scholarship opportunity and the fact that the state of Florida has two different levels. By attending a Florida high school, being a resident here, every student is eligible potentially. They have to also, beyond just being residents, they have to meet the criteria in service hours, their GPA requirements have to be met, as well as test score requirements. For your students, your sons and daughters, the requirement for the SAT is actually increasing for next year. The current graduates, I don't know if you've seen, we've published this before in other places and even in the handbook, the requirements for the different levels for the SAT are a little bit lower. But next year they're going up about 30 points in those areas. It is, for the higher award, the Florida Academic Scholars Program, the 3.5 GPA is required. That is a calculation that they make slightly different than we do. Mrs. Uzier talked about how colleges can do things differently. So does Bright Futures, and we definitely go through that with you and explain. But typically, the way they do things, it ends up being in our students' favor because our kids take extra science and social studies classes and so forth. As far as the test score, it's either a 1330 SAT or a 29 ACT for that higher award level. As far as the medallion scholars, that particular award, the current score that's required for the SAT is 1170. So next year for your kids, the SAT score would have to be a 1200, that's combined reading and math, or a 26 on the ACT. As far as the process of making sure that they're enrolled and have the opportunity to be awarded this, again, we go through that with them and explain in detail, really taking the classes and getting the grades, that's the big part, and then signing up and taking the tests. The service, you know that they're doing that, and they're going to meet the requirements pretty easily because ours for graduation match what the higher award is requiring too. And in terms of getting their grades to the state, we take care of that part of it. As far as getting the scores to the state for consideration, when they're actually applying, making sure that they've sent scores to at least one of the state universities, then they're going to be taken care of. The beauty of the testing piece of it, not that any senior would want to think about testing in their second semester just before graduation or even June after graduation, but that is an actual possibility. And that is something that many of our kids do. They might have the test scores that they need for admission purposes in the fall of their senior year, but they just miss one level or the other for the test score and they want to retest, either the SAT or the ACT. They could wait and regroup and take it in that second semester as late as June after their graduation date. As far as other parts of this process, there is a form that has to be filled out by the student. It's called the Florida Financial Aid Application, and for your students, that would open next October. It takes 10 minutes. The name makes you think potentially that you're going to have to include income data from yourselves, and they do not ask any of it. It's a very simple process, and they do not have to reveal anything about your money matters. As far as financial aid and need-based money, that's a separate process called, and the form that you would use is called the FAFSA. So, discipline reporting and online presence. This is very definitely an area that would be different. As far as the discipline reporting and our obligation and what we do, just know that it is basically because colleges and you would appreciate this, given the climate that we live in and the unfortunate and very sad situation of the different shootings that have happened and so forth, to make sure campuses are as safe as they possibly can be, making sure that they know the student population coming in. As far as when does discipline reporting take place, we basically are doing it based on information. If you look in our family handbook, it's in there on page 35. Any student experiencing what's considered a level 5 disciplinary incident at any time between grade 9 through 12, that very well would be a reportable situation. If that happens to be a circumstance your son or daughter is faced with, we talk about it with you, we explain the process and what goes on. I'll be honest with you, what colleges are looking for would be repeat type, more habitual type situations, particularly if it was a more violent type scenario or threatening situation. So it's not anything that we've really had to worry about too much. So we would guide you through that whole thing. Colleges ask questions on their applications. They ask them directly, have you ever had certain kinds of incidents on your school campus? It's yes or no. And if it is a yes, they give them the opportunity to explain. And so we follow up and we will coordinate so that the information given by the student more or less is going to go in line. Piece of things. Mrs. Uzier also alluded to this already. There are circumstances when kids are kids, and the thing is with social media, they share a lot. They need to be smart about what they share. Posting things that are not really favorable can potentially come back to bite them. And we talk to them about this, and we just encourage you to ask them to be mindful about what their presence is out there, their digital footprint. Our role is to help. We hope we don't scare you and make you feel like this is too daunting, and what we also try and do is break it down so that it's not overwhelming at any particular point. I think that if they will follow our prescribed timelines on the testing and resume writing and essay writing and get things to us so that we can review, it will be less stressful. I wish it could be stress-free, but we'll try and lighten the load as best we can. The ways we deliver the information through our conferencing, there's a spring conference coming up. If you didn't have your summer meeting, I know that I'm going to be meeting with some families, probably a few between now and Christmas time, and then even into January, but then definitely the spring conversation, where we'll not only talk about test results and things like that, but we'll even start looking at their senior year classes and also looking at their college list, that kind of thing. Our parent programming, we also have parent coffees. Many of you come to that. Guidance retreats, they'll have their junior year guidance retreat. Their spring opportunity includes the essay writing that I mentioned before. And then something to keep in mind, typically in the beginning part of June, Mrs. Bell, Mrs. Uzier, and I will have a college application boot camp. We open this to the public as well for other rising seniors if they would like to come. It's part of our summer enrichment program, so it's not a required thing by any means. But if you want them to have a jump start, if they want to come and have a jump start, an opportunity to work on applications, that's a great opportunity to do it. Junior year homework, I mentioned that we're going to hold the juniors tomorrow. After chapel, we're going to go over some basics. It's nothing that we really are expecting them to do before Christmas, but we want them to think about and dust off that resume, for example, getting things kind of geared back up. And we want them to at least acknowledge that, yes, as this semester is ending, they really will be rising seniors. And so we need to kind of reshift our focus a little bit. This timetable is very small, but we've touched on basically all of these parts. In November, the meeting tonight, the student is going to be given their little homework assignment. December, PSAT comes back, thinking about registering for SAT, ACT, and then in the spring, they're going to have their retreat. They'll have a touch-base meeting with their college advisor as well, those resume workshops that I mentioned before, and then trying to figure out maybe an opportunity to go visit a few colleges wouldn't be a bad idea. Wrapping up. Things that definitely have changed. Think about what your priorities are in terms of whether it's money, the academic piece, how to figure out the fit is a big part of that conversation with your students, the multifaceted approach, the fact that it isn't just GPA and test scores, that these other things, resume, essay, are also going to be a part of it. And don't forget, we're here to help. Your role, be the coach, not the quarterback. Let them do the plays. They're out there working. You're supportive, we're supportive, but they have to take the lead. Forms, deadlines, that's a part of the real world, that's a part of the adult world, and if they don't have practice now, imagine what their first year, freshman year, will be like when they're basically without you having to face some of these things and dealing with things on their own. You want them to know how to do it. So releasing and letting them do is a really good thing. You will be so glad you did. I promise you that. Reminder about our meeting in January. You'll see more about this, so please make note of it. And then I will also mention there's a great opportunity for another research into colleges in February. We belong to a consortium of private school counselors in Central Florida, and we're hosting a fair in Orlando at UCF. They can see UCF's campus while they're there, and they can also see a bunch of different schools in a true fair setting. The packets.
What was the
skipped
date
over
on that?
this.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go back.
On previous, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The packets that you picked up tonight for the class rings, if you didn't pick up one, there are more in the back. The Jostens is the company that takes those orders, and any questions you have really should be directed to them. It should include information about placing the orders as well as details about styles and so forth. A representative is actually going to be here on Monday during second lunch, and we will let the students know. We're going to send a remind text to them so that they'll know to go find the representative if they would like to have a conversation with them about placing an order for a classroom. And that is it, except if you do have questions. Did we overwhelm you? I hope not. Anybody? Yes, sir. Yes. We'll call it the long essay, if you will. There's one main essay typically, and it's 650 words max. So there are shorter essay questions sometimes, and those can be 150 to 250 words.
I didn't see anywhere where you said this is the time to start sending applications in.
Applications, that is the fall of the senior year. That's an excellent question. So prep now in dealing with the actual submission of applications. When we get back in the fall of the senior year, we'll have another meeting, actually the night of back to school night. We ask senior parents to join us before you go and meet the teachers and so forth, and we go through some basic things with them, and after that point, we start to put paperwork together and start with another college conference where we identify a timeline with the students, and the fall is the busy time, fall of senior year.
Each school has its own deadline.
Yes, and deadlines can vary. I will tell you that there are quite a few around the November 1 timeframe, and those early opportunities that Mrs. Bell mentioned, like early decision, early action, particularly the early action, which is non-binding, we encourage students to think about those deadlines as opportunities to get things going and done, actually, so that if by Thanksgiving they could have all, if not maybe, let's say at least some of their applications done by Thanksgiving, it really gives them breathing room so maybe they can think about something else and enjoy their senior year.
So the junior grades are really the important ones.
Junior grades are extreme. They don't see senior grades when they're applying necessarily, unless they apply to a school that has a regular decision deadline in January. But here's the deal, okay? Every application, when a student is maybe talking about and sharing their grades at that point, a transcript would include the junior year grades. They're gonna ask, what classes are you taking your senior year? And then, after that application goes in the fall, those colleges are gonna be expecting a mid-year report come January. So they will be looking at the opportunity that a college could rescind admission.
Do you see that happening?
Do I see it happening?
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, that's not happened to our kids in the last little bit that we've seen, but we know that it does happen. Yes. Yes.
About Bright Futures, is it only apply to Florida schools?
That's an excellent question. So Bright Futures does apply to Florida schools only. If you're qualifying for Bright Futures, I don't want to confuse you. Universities are going to be higher. When you hear, if you read about the Bright Futures levels, the top award for academic scholars basically is paying 100% of the tuition and even fees now at a state university. But it can be used at private schools as well. It will not necessarily equate to that 100% tuition. Okay, that being said, if kids are scoring really well on their tests and have really good grades and they apply to schools outside of Florida, there's a chance that they're going to be offered some scholarship money. Will they call it Bright Futures? No. But at the same time, good test scores, good grades are helpful. I'm sorry? If they're in Florida, Bright Futures money comes from the state. If you're out of state, it would have to come from that institution. So the top award is 100% tuition at a state university, and the second award level is 75%. So it's nice. And I will tell you, I'll use FIT as an example.
Organization that Bright Future scholarships are capped at 100% of state tuition?
Yes.
Okay.
Plus the fees and the books.
The fees for the higher award are covered. Not books, but like
Oh,
fees.
Faith got her last year, they gave her like $500 for books.
They do give some extra.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
How does it go from, because I know that you get a certain amount of dollars for the, like, if you're going to a private college, so is it what, $200 credit is what you get if you got like the highest level of the Florida Bright Futures?
At the private schools,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be able to quote you what the
Yeah.
dollar amount is, and I think that it actually could vary.
Okay.
Like I said, for the example of FIT, the fact that they awarded 60 full tuition scholarships, I would venture to say it was more than $200 of credit.
Okay.
Okay, but would that be the same at Rollins? Not necessarily.
Okay.
Well, for Florida State, Bright Futures, what they paid was about, because Florida State said is their tuition is $200 something an hour. So that's about what Faith got.
Yeah.
So,
So do you have statistics of Bright Future awardees from HG graduates?
That's a good question. I'm not gonna
Right,
remember.
It's in, we
We do
yes,
have
we do
profiles.
calculate that, and in our graduation program, I want to say it's close to 70%, get one of the two levels of Bright Futures. And just to kind of articulate a little bit more about Bright Futures at a private college, so there's a 100% tuition at the public university. That dollar amount at that higher level Bright Futures at a private university is going to be about $6,000 plus there's an additional grant that used to be called the FRAG but is now called something else like
Ease. It's called Ease,
The
yeah.
Ease grant is another $3,500 from the state that isn't tied to anything about testing, and any student who is a Florida resident would automatically have coming from the state into their account to pay for private Florida college education. So at the highest level, a kid is probably going to start out with close to $10,000 of that private school price tag taken care of by the state. And then on top of that, when Mrs. Pagan's talking about FIT giving 60 full tuition scholarships, FIT is also saying, in addition to that 10,000, we're going to actually, with our institutional money, take it up to full tuition. So essentially, those top kids are having the equivalent of what it would cost for them to go to a public university to go to that private university, because their only expenses in that case would be for those extra things related to housing and food and those expenses.
None of that's income-based.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking, so that's a merit scholarship program. Bright Futures is a merit scholarship program. And institutional money that is outside of financial aid, need-based financial aid is a gift. It's a grant. Going back to that full price, sticker price to what the actual price that you would pay. Their colleges are factoring that into how they're structuring their pricing. That they're going to give grants, gifts to students who have hit a criteria of merit award.
Something you said earlier, though, a lot of private institutions are becoming more creative
They
in
are.
scholarship grants
I mean, if they've got
for each year.
endowments, yes, if they've got nice endowments and so forth, they very well could have additional
Okay.
funds to offer. In terms of, let me go back to that list, there are resources, I didn't cover on them, search opportunities for scholarships like FastWeb and Merit Aid. FastWeb, if the student creates a profile, answers a bunch of questions, theoretically it's filtering and sending them emails about scholarships that are related to some interest or characteristic they've indicated. You'll get a ton of email, but nonetheless, it's a way to search for them. And then Merit Aid is a way to search for scholarships from the institutions, from the colleges themselves. The same information would be on the college websites. This might be a little bit of a shortcut in that you put the name of the school in and it would pull up for you a list of the scholarships that they offer. And then I made reference to our newsletter. We do try and advertise as many scholarships as we know about. Our current seniors, you were talking about timeline, our current seniors were extremely busy from the time in terms of different parts of the application process. From the time school started through November, they're not finished, but at the same time, the busiest time is probably behind us. We've still got deadlines November 30th, quite a popular opportunity, December 1 as well, and then if they were applying regular decision to certain schools, there's a January push as well. So anyway,
I was going to say, with all of the questions that we're getting about the financial piece, we do have the recording from October of Mr. Lally,'s presentation, and we will repeat that again next fall, so you can certainly come to that, but maybe when we email the PowerPoint, we can add that link back in, and that might give you a chance to go ahead and process, now that you've kind of started to think more specifically about that, and watch that presentation, and then maybe follow it up by coming back in October. That, because he does do a great job of kind of breaking it down and giving you some definite pieces of information that might help.
As a reminder, that's the guy from FIT?
yes.
Correct, that's who does our Money Matters presentation. So we can send that back out. That's the value of having the recording, and not just having to rely on him physically being here, that you can watch it lots of times if you need to see the details more than once.
Yes. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
When you were talking about when to sign up for the SAT and the ACT, and so you said in general the spring is the better time for juniors to take it. But in one of the slides, I had circled April ACT because I was thinking that was the spring, but then in one of the slides it recommended February ACT.
The February ACT is the first one available in the spring.
Okay, so that is considered a spring one.
Well,
So
second,
February.
yes.
Okay.
Second semester.
So that's the one that usually you would recommend the juniors aim for, is the February ACT and the March SAT.
We certainly recognize that schedules and different, I mean, it's one Saturday in that month. So if it doesn't work, then the April,
And is the deadline for signing up for that, is it usually a month prior?
it's about a month prior.
Okay.
One thing that I did not mention, when it comes to, and this is, you're gonna maybe not agree with this, but we do encourage students to consider doing this when they register. Talking about costs, one way to save a little bit of money, when they register for an SAT or an ACT, they have an opportunity to go ahead and request that scores be sent to colleges, to 4 colleges for free. Something to think about. Anybody else?
What,
Go ahead.
sorry, well, what if the score's not as good as they want it to be and they don't want it set? Is
Well,
that triggered
yes,
automatically?
And then this, again, is maybe taking it into a little more detail than we might need right now. Most colleges do what we call super scoring, which means if they have 2, 3, or more test dates, they're gonna use the best test section and add those together from different test dates. So, good question. Yes.
So if they're signing up to have those scores sent, but they haven't actually applied to that college, where do those scores go?
I know it seems odd, but they
They don't have
actually,
like
there's
a
like a
profile.
repository, and they can pull it when the student applies, they're able to pull that score. So, this is, they've dealt with it for a long time, this way, so. And they're starting to anticipate junior scores coming in at that point. Good question. Well, thank you all for coming. If you do have other questions, we'll be here for a couple more minutes, and, our college office, I hope you have our emails, and you know where we are, 201.
That date of the fair at UCF?
February 29th.
Well, I looked at my calendar, maybe I was
Did I put the
looking at
wrong date?
January. Okay, February.
Sorry, I was too far.
And that college fair is much more extensive than what we have locally. The local college fair is not as expansive in terms of out-of-state colleges. If they do have out-of-state colleges at the local college fair, it would be more alumni representatives, whereas this college fair is a very wide group of schools. So
I
it's-
apologize, that's right,
It's a Wednesday.
it should be a 29. Sorry, that's a
Oh, okay.
mistake. That's why I said what I did. I apologize.
Okay, so the 29th.
Typo.
29th?
It is the 29th, and I will make sure you see many publications with the correct date. The 29th. My bad. Very good. You're very welcome. Thank you all for coming. If you didn't get the packets for the rings, they're still in the back too.
Will there be another opportunity to get rings like later? This seems awfully soon.
You mean as far as placing the order on
Yes.
Monday? I think you can work with Justin. It doesn't have to be on Monday. If you have questions, if the student feels ready, they can, and
You can order all through, you could order one next fall. There's no, it's like an open
Yes.
ordering. We're not having a ring ceremony anymore, so it's just a matter of, your timing in terms of when you and your student are interested in that.